Welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us for our webinar, Shopper-Focused Marketing and Data-Driven Decision on the Path to Purchase. I am John Morgan, the Executive Director of the ACP, and I will be your moderator. With me is John Ross, President and CEO of IGA. If you read his bio, which is on the webinar console, you'll see a lifetime of analyzing shopper behavior and utilizing the learnings to impact success at retail. I've gotten to know John a little bit this past year, and I find that his approach to his work is with passion, curiosity, and enthusiasm, and these traits drive his success. We're going to get started soon, but I want to take a moment and share with you an update of what we're working on at the Association of Coupon Professionals. All of our task forces and committees meet each spring and brainstorm on the key issues they want to address for the coming year. Here are some of them. E-commerce. Predictions are that up to 25% of sales are going online by 2022. To address this, we were looking at the big picture of how it will impact retailers and manufacturers, and then more specifically the impact on coupons and e-commerce transactions. Here's a passing thought for you. In the industry, we tend to think brick and mortar versus online. Consumers don't think that way. They're always online. It's in their hands. More than half of internet traffic is with mobile devices. Consumer insight. The market research task force is looking at utilizing loyalty data to measure coupon success. In best practices, we've got some coupon coding watchouts for coupon doubling, start date, expiration date. We're going to try and tackle random weight coupons and also misredemption, fraud, and stacking in digital mobile situations. We are exploring guides around electronic clearing of coupons. You may see some tests on the horizon. And, of course, the conference. The planning committee is meeting next week for 2019. We're going to be in Orlando next April. And the webinar series. We have a panel coming up in September that I'll share with you at the end of the webinar. If you're interested in volunteering for any of these initiatives, contact me, please. Also, the industry is working through the JICC on the Universal Digital Coupon Initiative. We are heading to a concept alpha testing in a retailer lab. We're going to be testing a coupon bureau, a digital coupon positive master file, and its interaction with retailer POS. Providing educational forums like this requires time, effort, and resources. We have sponsors to help defray the cost of presenting the webinar. I want to take a moment and thank Cunningham Electronics for sponsoring this webinar. To thank them, I'd like to briefly tell you about what they do. Cunningham Electronics has an electronic coupon redemption system that eliminates coupon fraud and provides proof of purchase. To prove our claim, we pay retailers the next day for coupons redeemed the day before with no recourse. You can find out more at www.cunninghamcouponsystem.com. Let's do some housekeeping. First, screen navigation. On your screen to the left is a speaker bio. If you look through these bios, you'll see unique experience and expertise of our presenter. The PowerPoint slides are in the middle, and the question box is to the right, Q&A. You can maximize and minimize each of these boxes. Press the box where the PowerPoint is to make the slides bigger. Down the bottom of your screen, you'll see a bunch of buttons. They are Help, Slides, Bio, Q&A, and a completion certificate. If you want to print a certificate of completion, you should do that before you leave the webinar today. There's also a survey button. Please click on this when the webinar is over as a survey to help us gather facts about this and future webinars. It is brief. If you accidentally minimize a button up top, want to get it back, click on it, and it'll pop back up. Please ask questions as they come. We're going to try and address as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Similar questions will be combined. Some questions may not be answerable today, but we'll capture them and try and help you. Ask away. With all the housekeeping done, let me welcome John Ross. Hi, John.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. This is great. This presentation is a very similar version to one that I did back in New Orleans in April, and I guess the fact that you invited me back, John, suggests that it was well received, so I appreciate that. The point of this presentation is really in two parts. You know, the first part looks at shopper behavior and the process that we use as marketers historically versus perhaps a more modern approach to how to think about engaging with shoppers to deliver what they want and in turn get the sales we want. And then the back part of this is a description of what's going on at IGA. For those of you who have read my bio or know me, you know I'm relatively new in this job. I think I'm going into my 9th month here as CEO of IGA. I spent most of my career on the retail side in some form or fashion, whether it was working on the technology side or working with big data companies, working in the agencies, or then for the retailers themselves in merchandising and marketing. So I've been really lucky to have been able to experience all the kind of component parts that drive retail, and to have worked with both small retailers, large ones, global ones, public companies, private ones, family businesses, and also to be able to do the holy trinity of merchandising, marketing, and operations. So I've had experience in all of those, and that's helped me, I think, to be able to imagine what the future of a retail needs to be through this perspective of all the kind of stupid and frustrating things that I've done in my career, and I think that many retailers get caught up in over the years, because retail is so tricky. So today's presentation is very much through the lens of retail, and it's very much based on this premise of the emerging shopper and how their changing needs may in fact force us to have to change the way we operate. This presentation was designed out of a book that I just launched this year. It's a book called Fire in the Zoo, and it's about shopper marketing and shopper influence and all the things that we do in marketing. And it's got this kind of crazy subhead. It's also about how screaming at people usually doesn't work. And this first part of the speech is very much about the trap that we get in marketing. So I started my retail career off in operations, and then moved into merchandising. And every single week, especially if you work for a high-low retailer or an industry that's highly promotional in nature, you find yourself caught up in this ongoing and ruthless trap in which you have to constantly figure out what to do to get people to come shop you again this weekend, this holiday weekend, this holiday season, or whatever your purchase cadence is. And in that industry, we've used all of these techniques. We've used sales, and we've used coupons and discounts and sweepstakes and all of these things as mechanics in order to force shopper behavior. And in fact, you can find yourself in this environment where it almost feels like your job is to come up with the next gimmick. And this demand to have some new news every single week, something to fill the ad, something to go now on the website or in your on your blog posts or your emails that go out, and this ruthless demand for new content and new content all the time that will get shoppers coming to your front door. But in a way, that demand is also a monodimensional relationship with the shopper. It's one in which you are communicating to them in this kind of old-fashioned marketing concept. I'm going to run an ad and people will respond. It's a stimulus response model. And if you've ever worked in one of these companies where you're highly promotional in nature, or if you're a manufacturer where you're supporting your trade teams, where they're constantly demanding, what could I have to drive traffic this quarter or this month or this holiday season, you know what this is like, this kind of ongoing demand for higher results off of the same marketing spend. Now, I spent my career, started off in consumer electronics, not grocery, and I sort of lived this. And I had this boss that would say to me all the time, for this weekend I want fire in the zoo, fire in the zoo. And what he meant is he wanted shoppers all lined up. He wanted crazy mania going on in the store under the impression that if we could use urgency messages and these discount messages, we could constrict behavior and force the shoppers to shop our stores the way we wanted. And I think we actually have a commercial here that we'll play.
It's colossal.
Maybe with sound.
It's stupendous. Soundtrack's monster
and maybe not.
New Orleans.
So what you're seeing in the background is a commercial that I actually created many years ago. This is the Soundtrack Monster Sale, and you can see we use every possible mechanic here, 0% financing and savings and all these crazy things, and somebody in a monster suit and explosions going on in the background. It's an example of chucking everything into the blender and spinning it around, and output comes urgency. And that was the early part of my career. And I spent many days trying to figure out on our calendar, what's the next mechanic going to be that's going to get shoppers into our store? How are we going to get, this combination of urgency and shopper response rates? And what are these tricks that we can use? Like, can we stack up offers? Can I use a rebate in order to show a lower price? Can we use some combination of free delivery and a coupon in order to be able to hit a price point that still allows me to survive and make my margins? And your entire world is consumed with this mechanic of stimulus and response. And it is tiring. You can find yourself really, really overwhelmed by it. And unfortunately, the mathematics, the way retailers in particular have historically looked at this, and the way we measure our success in retail often reinforces this behavior. Because you've designed these mechanics, like, for example, a weekly print ad. We designed that mechanic in order to draw shoppers in the store, and then we judge whether the offers that we did actually made results. But sometimes the way we count, sometimes the science of how we measure may be reinforcing us to repeat these behaviors when in fact the shopper may not be responding in the way we think, or if they're doing it, they're doing it under duress. And the print ad is a great example. And it's not unusual, I think, for marketers today to look around and go, why are retailers still spending so much money in print? And what's going on here? And if you're in the coupon industry, like most of the folks on this call, it may be mysterious for you why today, when newspaper readership is an all-time low, coupons in the newspaper still continues to be one of the major transmission vehicles for savings in the grocery industry. And so all of these kinds of things. But if you look at the way we count, the way we do the math, sometimes the math works to sustain these behaviors rather than to challenge us to think differently. So this is an instance, so this is the kind of math. So if I want to measure this print ad, I'm going to look at the number of items a page. And if I have 5 items, I'm going to count those 5 items up on a page and see how much incremental sales I got per item, less whatever I paid for the items, less the cost of the ad, and that calculates my ROI. That seems like a reasonable way to calculate, did I get a lift out of the things that I stuck on my ad? Well, the problem is, unless you're really, really good at predicting, you may not get those 5 items right. So as a retailer, you hedge your bets, and you put 6 items, and you put 10, and then you put 15, and pretty soon you got 100. And pretty soon the ad is chock filled with all these offers and all this stuff going on, because if you're counting more offers, less your advertising cost, your lift goes up, and it ends up looking like your ad becomes increasingly effective. But of course, a highly dense retail ad filled with lots and lots of items isn't necessarily what the shopper's looking for. And in fact, in our world today, we know the shopper is often overwhelmed by all these choices. There's all this information coming at them, not just in that print ad, but in our email marketing and our digital marketing and all the things that manufacturers are doing directly to the consumer, plus what the retailer is doing. And so in that complexity of all this advertising stimuli, are we in fact driving the behaviors that we want? And this is the question. This is kind of cathartic moment. It's like I felt like, wow, we've put all this energy into getting shoppers to respond, and what have they done? They absolutely have responded. They've learned well, and they've learned to read through our systems to intuit what we're trying to do, and then they try to subvert it. And the coupon world is a great example of this, where there are now blog sites and experts out there that will teach consumers how to take advantage of our well-intentioned promotions in order to get, a ridiculous amount of discounting going on in a way that we as brands or retailers never intended. And when you sit back and look at it, is this the relationship we really want with shoppers? Is this really what marketing is going to be about? It's no wonder a lot of psychology majors go into marketing. You start with this premise that I can cajole and trick and manipulate. I can use these psychological tools like urgency and coupons and rebates and discounts to force shoppers to behave we want, but it is so tiring. I want to switch gears completely, and I promise you this will sink in. I want to talk a little case study. So I bumped into this case study many years ago, and it was a case study of a boy who was trying to get a date for the dance, and he failed. And he was not the most popular kid, and it disappointed him. He wasn't able to get a date. And this is the kind of kid who wears black T-shirts to school and watches sci-fi and reads a lot of fantasy books. But he was also into science, and so he thought he would use his science fair project to try to determine what does it take to get a girl to say yes to you at the date. Now, why I love this case study is because here's this teenager who's coming into something that he is mystified about, he doesn't know, and instead of trying to guess what's about, he says, I'm going to use science. I'm going to try to determine what actually are the factors that gets a girl to say yes to a dance to me. And in fact, that feels like a parallel to me of what we should be doing in marketing. If I've got a new product launch, if I've got a new department in my store, if I want people to come see the specials that I've got for Labor Day weekend, or whatever my objective is, really my question ought to be, shoppers, what does it take in order to get you to consider my product? What does it take to get you to buy? And if you think about the balance of our lives, certainly the balance of my career, I spent so much energy on trying to guess and to trick and manipulate versus trying to understand and intuit what it is that shoppers want, that this case study was a cathartic moment for me, because all of a sudden you start to think about it, wow, there may be a completely better and more interesting way. Now, this kid on the left here, his science fair project is Why Chicks Dig Me, which is probably not the right science fair project to get a date for the next dance. The kid on the right did Pokemon battle strategies, also probably not the right science fair project. Our kid in this instance, he did a survey. And he just went and asked 8th grade girls all across the Houston School District. This was done in Texas many years ago. And he just asked all these questions. What would it take to get you to say yes to a boy who asked you to a dance? And he learned all these really interesting things. He learned, like, when you ask the girl matters. If you wait too late, it feels like you're desperate in the last choice, and she's likely to say no. How you ask is critical. And do you do it in front of her friends, or do you do it through an email, or what's the right way to do it? And certainly, things that he thought mattered, like did what her parents think of you matter? Absolutely did not. What her friends think of you did. And so he got all these learnings out of it. He was able to reformat his value proposition, and he was able to successfully go and get a girl to say yes to him at his next dance. He made the news. He got very popular. I don't know what he's doing today. He's probably got an online dating service. But it's fascinating, this idea, this very complicated and scary thing, to say, just tell me what it takes to get to yes. Tell me what it takes to get to yes. And for us as marketers, it's a dramatic shift in the way of thinking about how we go to market. So away from these techniques and tricks, controlling and try to force behavior, to force the shopper to behave we want, to a more interactive and iterative dialogue with the consumer that says, what's it take to get you from undecided to decided? From undecided to decided. And then that's a really interesting set of phrases, because a consumer is someone who uses, who eats, who drives, right? They're engaged with the product. And a customer is someone who just bought. So in my stores, if someone comes in and checks out an IGA, they are a customer. But a shopper is someone in process. They're someone who has not yet decided. And so this idea of thinking, getting our language really sharp at what we're trying to do. Shopper marketing is about finding those people who have not yet decided but are in decision-making mode. And if we can understand them, if we can put science against them, we can begin to get super smart about how we make decisions, how to spend our company's marketing dollars, and how to orient the focus of our marketing against the results that we really want. Now, at the time that all this work was going on, I was working for Interpublic Group, and we had this cool thing called the Emerging Media Lab. And so I repurposed that lab for understanding this and created this business called Shopper Sciences. And the entire mandate of this was try to understand that very peculiar time between when a need is created and you've completed your purchase, that period of indecision, however long or short that is, to try to understand what shoppers are doing that helps them to get the confidence to say yes. And if I can use good research to figure out what it takes to get to yes, then I can go back into my media planning, and I can go with my agencies, and I can go with my merchandising teams, and I can begin to make decisions of how we communicate based on what the shoppers need versus the behaviors that I've been doing in the past. This process of moving from undecided to decided, you can actually plot it. You can go to talk to shoppers. You can do ethnographic research where you follow them around. And you can literally plot all the things that they do and that they see and hear and recall. And you can kind of plot that as they start and as they all the way go to the moment they hand their credit card or their cash over. And you can score, have the consumer score what's mattering, what's really influential, and what's not. And you can create these really interesting curves. And one of the interesting things about the curves is this concept of time. The shoppers start off often uninformed, and the process of shopping is becoming informed. Now, in a fast-moving commodity product, a consumer goods product, for example, those cycles may be very short, like this chart over on the right, and the height of the effort that it takes of this bar here in order to get to a moment where you say, I'm now confident enough to make the choice, it may be very low. But don't presume that it's low just because it's a fast-moving consumer good product. I'll give you an example in a second. And there are certainly other categories, automotive or buying a new kitchen for your home, where the cycle is long, it may take months, and where the barriers that you need to overcome in order to feel confident are quite high. I worked for a number of years at Home Depot, and getting someone to build a new deck or to renovate their kitchen, these are non-trivial projects. And the decision-making process actually has multiple toll gates. They have to figure out what they want to do and what style they're even interested in, and then they have to figure out whether they've got the skills to do it themselves, or they will need a contractor or a service provider. And then finally, they got to figure out how they're going to pay for it and what they can afford versus demands. These are all really complicated decisions. It turns out the science that we applied that you could ask these same questions about shoppers, whether they're doing a fast-moving consumer good product, whether they're doing a service like banking or financial services, whether they were using an online dating service or an e-commerce transaction or a physical store. It turns out that the process of shopping to consumers, really defined by decision-making, was the same. It was just longer or shorter or more difficult to get to yes based on the kind of products that they were looking for. That journey from undecided to decided, it's not empty. It's filled with marketing stimuli. And if you think about the last considered purchase you made, so whether it was making a decision to go from a high carbohydrate or high sugar diet to a low, or whether it was choosing a new flat screen TV for your home or a new PC, or whatever the decision that you did, you moved through that process with a combination of stimulus that is thrown at you, where you are the recipient of TV advertising or radio ads or seeing ads in magazines, and then things that you do yourself, so where you engage with your friends and family for advice, or where you go online and do a search. And certainly digital marketing has added a lot more choices to the shopper that allows them to be more active in the decision-making process than maybe they were 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. Early on, and I think still today, many marketing companies, especially advertising agencies, tend to segment these things, these kinds of marketing stimuli, into owned and earned and paid. And we tend to apply different research techniques to them all. But one of the big insights of the market research that we did, millions and millions of shoppers, one of the big insights was the consumers don't make the distinction. To them, getting advice from friends and family, going online, looking at user reviews, doing price comparisons, going into the store or the dealership or the bank, reading the print ad, all of it's just shopping. It's just decision making. And so normalizing that all across digital, in-store, online, and social media, and scoring it all in terms of influence on the shopper is kind of the big insight of this whole technique and kind of what today's speech is about. And certainly this technology has changed things where shoppers today expect retailers and brands to be more involved and more aware of what's going on. They expect them to make it easier to get to a decision and to use technology and learning in order to speed things up as they move through this process. But the problem is the shopper's doing a lot of stuff. What you see in this chart here is a ranking of shopper behavior, and this is across a huge swath of categories, not just grocery, but it's asking the question, what did you do from the moment that you began shopping to the end, and then where did you go, or do you recall doing during that period of time? And the height of these bars over thousands of shoppers represents the number of shoppers that said they used that category of media stimulus. So watched ads on TV here, for example, or went into the physical store. That's with the retail bar, that green bar over at the far right. Or these digital things. They did online general or online social versus offline social, which is, humans talking to each other. And so what you can see is shoppers are doing a lot of stuff. Now, one of the premises when I first began this research, 15 years ago, one of the hypothesis that we had, was that digital technology would end up replacing a lot of traditional marketing. That because the shopper could become so informed online, through user reviews or research, that they would not need to spend as much energy on traditional media, and therefore, especially the store, would lose its impact, and the shoppers would move through with far fewer marketing stimuli really affecting their behavior. I was stunned to see and continue to be stunned by the fact that proves to be not true. Shoppers are consuming more media. They're doing all this online stuff. They're doing social as well. The biggest growing bars here are these two greens on the left. But the green at the far right, the retail store, has remained remarkably stable. And what we're seeing here is the smarter the shopper becomes, the more engaged they are in the process and the more media they're consuming in order to get to feel like that they're smarter as they go along. Now, the previous chart was usage. This chart is a combination of usage and influence. And what you're seeing here is what actually influenced you, because just because you talked to your friends and family or you looked online or read the print, it doesn't mean that necessarily affected your decision. And in fact, you can probably guess that in all the things you did on your last purchase, whatever it was, a lot of what you saw or heard or did really wasn't really important. It may have turned out to be one or two things that really made the difference. And so what we try to do is extract usage, so lots of shoppers doing something, from influence. And what you'll see on a chart like this is that a lot of things that are out there today, like social media, talking with friends and family about items, or looking at the products on the shelf, or compare shopping price online, a lot of these things that are in the top influence bars aren't the kind of traditional media that we can even spend money on. In fact, probably 10 and probably over half of the top 15 influencers today are things that the consumer is doing themselves. They're engaging in research and connecting and building their shopping plan on their own with very, very little influence from us as marketers. And that's a very sobering moment in which you start to look at this and go, wow, there's a lot going on out here in which I may need to be more of a content provider than a broadcaster or a publisher. And the other thing that's quite interesting about the data, if you look at this over a number of years, is the change in what happens after the shopper buys. There's this iterative cycle here that when you go and purchase an item, what do you do in the remaining 48 hours after that purchase took place? And thinking about the transaction is not the end, but the beginning of the next one, either for your family members or for other people in your social circle. And what we're seeing is the purchase leads to publishing on behalf of the consumer in a way that's very, very powerful. Today we live in this world in which the shopper may be as active an agent in driving future shopper behavior as our broadcast TV or our traditional advertising or even our promotions. Now, with all that complexity, there's got to be a way to measure it, right? And the scientist in me wanted to say, well, let's plot it. Let's take all this stuff that they can do and not do, and let's take an individual category like buying a car or choosing to switch to a diet drink or purchasing frozen breakfast treats, whatever. Let's plot that, and let's see if we can't resolve down from all the things a shopper could be doing, hearing, and receiving to what actually matters. Let's use science to do that. And the problem today for all of us, this is why your job may feel so hard, is there's so many stimuli, so many things that can be happening across millions and millions of shoppers that you may end up with a lot of noise in the system. So on the left on this chart, I know it's not readable, all the things that shoppers can do, they say they do, or recall traditional advertising, direct marketing, email, all the stuff that we do. And over the right here is time across the bottom. These circles represent where different shoppers come into the bulk of the shoppers come into the shopping process is not important. If you start plotting shoppers, all the things that they can do, what you end up with a chart that looks like this. Each one of those lines, point to point, is an individual shopper's behavior from start to finish as they got to purchase. And of course, what this shows you is the complexity of our media world, so many things going on and so many stimulus going on, that if we tried to use all the things that shoppers are doing, no one's got the budget for this. And it'd be impossible. So what we do have to do is use statistics. We have to narrow down of all the things that are going on, what are the things that are most in common to the largest groups here. And so each of these spheres, I've normalized this now for the largest population, each of these spheres represents the kind of media that was most effective in this particular shopping trip of helping the shopper get from start to finish. Oops, I've gone too far here. And what it says is that digital technology is certainly influencing the shopper. You can see these big balloons here around search and online, but the store itself is still having a huge, and packaging is still having a huge influence on the shopper. So let me get through those again. So you can see search, online, promotion, but look at the influence of packaging there at the tail end of the transaction. It'd be interesting to get all of the folks inside of a brand, inside of a retailer, who are responsible for all the consumer touch points. Social media, print, your website, online, all the things that we do, including coupons and promotions, and put them together and go, how are we acting together cohesively to think about this journey from start to finish? Because if it turns out that digital is where the shoppers begin over here on the left, but packaging is driving the final transaction at the tail end with some of the highest influence scores, maybe we ought to work more cohesively on thinking about all of these media nodes together to build a marketing plan. Now, another way we plot this is by heat mapping, and that's trying to understand any individual node and what's going on here. And what you're seeing is this intersection between time, time's going across the bottom, and then the bloom, the bright color, is the concentration of people that say they're doing this. And then we do this for each individual media node. And what we have found is by either heat mapping influence that goes along, or by plotting individual shoppers on their path from start to finish and doing it in large audiences, we begin to see some trends. The first thing is what you think influences shoppers may not actually be what's really influencing them at all. And I'll give you 4 examples here. So the one on the left is work we did in the automotive business, in which we were trying to plot what was most influential in the journey from start to finish. And it turns out something that most automotive marketers had not really considered to be a media node was, and that was the test drive. And it turns out that shoppers made a lot of their decisions about how well the test drive actually performed. Was it creepy? Was the guy sitting behind you and talking the entire time? Did he actually let you drive or not? Did you feel comfortable in the experience? Did you feel like you got to test the car? Learning to program that experience is huge. The one on the far right is work we did in the toy business, and it turns out the media influencer for the shopper being the mom, came from the consumer, and we actually were able to plot the number of times the kid had to ask for the product. We called it the wine effect. How often the kids had to ask for the product in order for the mom to relent. And so the child itself, programming advertising against the child, which sounds creepy today, but at the time used to be something they did, is actually a marketing influence on the shopper in terms of the decisions that they make. And of course, here this one in the middle is a power tool example, and it turned out that pros, contractors, plumbers, electricians, giving reviews online at a website like a Home Depot, that pros talking to each other about the tools that they like were highly influential on consumers who are making a decision that, wow, if this pro says this is a good product for them, it's probably going to hold up and be a good product for me. And these are the kinds of unexpected influencers that we can get when we start plotting this across the board. This idea of shopper influence, understanding what's going on, it is a shift in thinking, and the key of the shift in thinking is my role as a marketer. Because under the old model, under that monster sale ad that I played, or under the way that we talked to Somar, my job was to guess, and then to provide a stimulus which changed response. This new model says my job as a marketer is to be the best listener in the world, to engage with the shopper and find out where they're doing, where they're going for information, and what kind of information is influential, and then to deliver that. And fundamentally, this shift is a shift from marketing as an agent of behavior change to one of customer service. Because if you think about it, if I can be there to answer your questions, deliver the information you need, and deliver it in a way that seems responsible and caring, man, you're going to be my customer for life. I started off as a teenager working in music stores, and the kids used to come in, and the other salespeople would shoo the kids away because they would bang on the piano or make a loud noise on the guitar, and I would just pull the kid aside. I'd show him how to play 2 or 3 chords, and I'd tell him to go find your mom in the mall and bring him back. And then I would say to the mom, listen, if I could teach your kid to play these 3 chords in 10 minutes, think what they could do with lessons. And, oh, by the way, we can rent you this guitar, this piano, and you don't have to put a lot of money out. And pretty soon, I was one of the top salesperson in the chain because I was thinking and trying to anticipate intuitively what it is that was the fear of the parent and the fear of the kid. The kid was feared the parent would never buy him a guitar, but the actual shopper, the decision maker, was afraid that the money spent on a musical instrument would be wasted if their child didn't have talent or wouldn't stick with it. And so that idea of finding that insight that's driving it, that allows us to make decisions, is really the kind of key to all of this. Now, I want to switch to grocery, and I want to switch to IGA. So I'm the new CEO of a grocery chain. IGA is a fascinating company. We are an international company with over 6,000 stores worldwide. We're in China and Japan. We're in South Africa and Russia, and we're in the U.S. and Australia. And the U.S. is about 1,100 stores. And I come into this new role. I wanted to apply those same techniques that I've been describing, trying to understand what's going on, and to understand the framework as the CEO of this company. That how could I provide leadership in a way that used those techniques? So the full impact of what's going on in the grocery industry is not just one of the competition of traditional grocery stores, or the relationship with retailers and brands, but it's also one of new entrants to the space. Lots of people selling grocery, dollar stores, discounters, and then, of course, the growth of the pure-play e-commerce providers like Amazon and Jet.com. There's massive change going on in this industry. What are the drivers and what's really going on? And if you think about some of these trends like demographics and changes in housing and location and food and health and medicine, and then obviously this play for convenience, this is the most interesting time to be in the grocery industry, but it's one in which listening and understanding what's going on is most important. The first place I wanted to go is to go, what's going on with mouths to feed? Are there fewer or more mouths to feed? And what's the nature of the families that we're going to be serving over the next few years? And this idea of starting with the opportunity of the marketplace and then working backwards is one that serves, any brand well. One of the problems that we face in the U.S. today in retail in general and in grocery in particular is this trailing effect that we've had as the baby boomers, the largest generation growth in the history of the United States, the biggest acceleration of growth, and an audience a population that transformed everything from our road systems, political systems, healthcare, social systems, everything. Baby boomers defined everything, including retail and things like suburbia and the strip mall and everything. As that group is aging, and as they no longer in the peak of purchasing, as they no longer have households with children and are moving in a different era of their life, what is going on in the generations that follow them? And of course, one of the reasons why it's been so tough lately, why it may feel like there's more stores than there are humans, and why sales traffic has been so hard to come on, is because the generation that followed the baby boom generation was smaller. And whenever you have a small generation follow a bigger one, it gets tough. And this is where economic crisis happens. It's where you get housing crises, you get healthcare crisis, because you have an increasingly smaller population of folks trying to pay for the services that are required by a needier, older generation. That's bad news. And that's why then that last few years have been really tough in the U.S., especially for many of our manufacturers. Comp sales growth has been hard to come by. But if you look what's coming, you can see what's going to happen on Gen Y and Gen X and Gen Z. We've got larger populations coming than the baby boom generation. And these populations are saying, especially the younger ones, that they're going to have more kids than at any time since the World War II generation. We'll see once they get adults whether they really do it or not. That's what they say they're going to do. But you have this large population of growth coming. This is very different in the U.S. than if you were to look at other economies. In Western Europe, for example, or in China, where you have very small populations forecasted for the next 20, 30 years, that's going to be very, very tough economically, especially for retailers. But in countries where population is going to grow, that's great news. But there's a second effect happening, is that the wealth accumulated by the baby boomers, there's never been a generation that's accumulated as much wealth as they do. And we've got a group of young people young families who are going to inherit more from their parents than at any time in American history as well. And so economic prosperity is ahead of us if we can live through this period here where it feels like there's not enough mouths to feed. That's good news. But the question is, what are those folks going to be like, and how should I imagine my stores for the future? As a retailer for many years, I didn't feel like we had to be that smart. We just had to open stores in locations where the shoppers were moving. And back in the 80s and the 90s, as populations moved into suburbia, you just plot a store where they're going to go, and then you sort of had a built-in comp every year, right? You knew those neighborhoods were going to grow by 5 to 10% a year, and you just plot the store there. As long as you executed okay, you could grow. And it didn't seem easy at the time, but by comparison to these times, it was far easier a way to build in growth, because you were thinking not as the audience I'm going to serve today, but what's the audience I'm going to serve at the end of my lease, 15, 20 years in the future. One of the problems we had based on the housing crisis here is there's a short supply of housing in most big markets in the United States today. And depending on where you live, you may be experiencing this, where there's undersupply, and that creates economic stress, but it also redistributes the population. And people, instead of everyone moving to suburbia, you're starting to see growth in urban populations and semi-urban and semi-suburban and semi-rural in a way that we haven't for a very long time. And we have a future here of a non-homogeneous growth of humans in the United States. But of course, we know that the families themselves are changing. And this today's speech is not about changing demographics or ethnographics, but you know this. You know that the complexion, and I don't mean that as a pun, the complexion of these families is going to be very, very different. You're going to have a combination of young adults still living at home for longer because they can't afford housing, and you're going to have older parents living with their children because they're living longer, and we're going to have very, very different ratio of adults to children in the household. And then, of course, the shoppers themselves are changing, and we've never had generations as passionate about health and wellness and food as we have today. And this isn't just a millennial thing or a Gen Y thing. Adults across every demographic want to be healthier. They want to figure out ways to eat smarter, and whether they know how to do it or whether they're actually doing it or not is irrelevant. Their desire to be smarter about the choices they make has never been more intense. This passion for food and this combining of food and health and wellness as an expression of your personal identity, and this idea that the grocery store may be an extension of things like nurturing and health strategies and a partner in helping you to be smarter. That's a very different way to think about a grocery store than as a place to replenish, commodity products on a repeating basis. If you look across our industry, and of course IGA is no different, if I look at the stores that are having the highest comp store sales and are growing the fastest, they're the ones that are reimagining their store around many of the perimeter categories. And they're re-merchandising their store all the way across around these ways to speed up purchasing and help you feel smarter about the choices that you make. They're becoming a better partner. If you go out today and you ask shoppers what they want from a grocer, they'll tell you that they want to. These are not necessarily in order, and probably the first 5 of these are statistically tied for first place. But they will say things like they want a grocer that can help them, eat smarter or provide fresh and healthy choices for their family. They always want great deals and everyday value. That never goes away. But smaller, easier to shop. They are looking for local products increasingly, fun to shop, new items, personalized store service, and of course, the idea that their loyalty is rewarded by the retailer understanding them and treating them as if they're special. What's interesting about this list and why this list is so unique today versus what it was 10 years ago is you might not have seen things like healthy and fresh and local. You wouldn't have seen those attributes being way up at the top like you do today. And so we have a change in the shopper's demand that are looking for a more personal and intimate shopping experience, one where they can have a relationship with that supplier and where they think that supplier knows them better. And it's really interesting how close that lines up with the way IGA started out. We started out as family businesses. Today we're still made up of family businesses. And the whole point of IGA was to allow these independents to compete against the emergence of corporate retailing and massive chains. This was A&P back in 1926. And today, the names of the retailers may change. We may be competing against Walmart or an Amazon, but the idea of family businesses learning and combining from knowledge with each other in order to be smarter is our legacy. Today's IGA is a combination of individual families serving their communities in really unique ways. They are amazing businesses. These are really smart entrepreneurs that connect with their shoppers, and they customize their assortment, their pricing, their service level, and their store to what that local neighborhood needs and demands in a way that makes it very difficult for big chains to do. And in fact, when I was with a big chain, this idea of figuring out a way to be hyper-local, to shift from homogenous retailing to customized local is always something we aspired to. It's one that's very expensive and very difficult to do. In some ways, we're the largest grocery chain in the world. We're a pure-play grocery, and we operate in all of these countries all around. And so we have entrepreneurs that are solving problems with local shoppers in some of the smallest markets in the world and the most rural and economically challenged, all the way up to dense urban neighborhoods and high-end, high-service neighborhoods in a way that would probably surprise you that they're IGAs. And of course, as a chain, we're an interesting name. This is just the local numbers with over 1,000 stores here, about $8 billion in sales. We are positively comping. We're a fascinating chain, but often we're a chain that doesn't fit the radar of the way manufacturers think about our industry. Because the entrepreneurs operate under the IGA name doesn't mean that their purchases aggregate that way, because our retailers buy through wholesalers, and the wholesaler may not represent, or the brand may not be able to see how IGA performs outside of the wholesaler. They just may know I sell so much of my product into AWG or so much into Super Value or Brazzuto's, but they may not know how much of that is IGA. And it may turn out that we are one of their strongest national chains, but because of the way the data flows, I was surprised to learn we're kind of invisible. And yet, as a national chain in almost every state in the United States, and with some of the most beautiful, well-run, and entrepreneurial grocery stores, we are really a fascinating business. Because with 1,000 entrepreneurs all out there solving the problem at a local level, every IGA you visit is often an opportunity to learn something new, to see what innovation looks like in coastal markets where they have access to fresh local supply of seafood. Stores that have doubled down into meat and barbecue and on-site smoking and doing venison in ways that that no national chain could do. Or it could be the most incredible assortment of locally sourced produce that you've ever seen, and sort of everything in between. IGA really is a study in localized retailing rolled up under the banner of a national brand. And our retailers are in every possible location, from in downtown Seattle to some of the most remote locations. What makes us interesting, too, is that this membership concept, we're not a franchise, so there's not the same level of force and control. It allows these entrepreneurs to be highly intuitive, but we as a brand provide this layer on top of it for data, working with manufacturers. It's sort of all the cool stuff that you get to do as a national brand, but yet the operations of the store are run at an intensely local level. It's a very clever business model. We're in competition with everyone. There is no competitor that IGA doesn't face, from the dollar stores to the big players. And increasingly, our stores, which tend to be smaller formats, 20,000 square foot would be an average IGA store, and often some of the rural markets were smaller. For many years, the big national chains didn't go after us in those markets, but they are today. Everyone is trying to figure out how to grow to get bigger by getting smaller, and they're trying different formats and they're getting into markets, some with success and some struggling. What's fascinating about what's going on is as the big chains trying to figure out how to relate more locally, the ones that are having success are doing it, these Trader Joe's and Aldi's coming in with 18,000 square foot stores right into our neighborhoods. They're doing it without the partnership of national brands, and that is not the IGA strategy. Our strategy is to take what we do best and to modernize it in a way that Trader Joe's was out there with a homogeneous product, but is using marketing to reach shoppers at a local level is doing through puffery. And so we have this kind of genuine relationship in which IGA creates a relationship with the shopper, but we need to increasingly do that with data. Our families really are the brands. We are connected to the shoppers locally, and so we believe the entrepreneurs know best about what they're doing. But we're trying to modernize that brand, too, around this concept of local and fresh, because we know that the word local, connecting with local farmers, establishing a relationship between farmers and retailers, these local businesses working together, is a really powerful message. But we have to modernize, too, and we have to move into a digital world in which we have national advertising that allows a brand to engage with IGA nationally and make it easy for them to connect, because most independents are not easy to deal with. It's really tricky to reach. So we built a new product here, a new digital mobile marketplace that allows us to take national deals from manufacturers, whether they're price promotions, trade deals, rebates, even digital coupons, and to provide this national layer that allows the shopper to engage with us digitally and still be seeing their localized assortment and all the customized information. We've done this in a unique way because the national layer is new. It allows us to use rich media. We can use cooking videos, embed manufacturer product demos. We can do all sorts of exciting things with our advertising promise, because nationally we're not going to the traditional media. We're going right to what shoppers are saying. They want the kind of relationship they want with us, and we're developing this in a more interactive way. I want to end here talking about this idea of what we're trying to do together. First part of our presentation says, to be a great marketer, I need to be a great listener. I don't think retailers and manufacturers have been great at listening to each other. And a great example is product launches. So a product launch comes out, the retailer may see it as just competition for something on the shelf. They may not understand why it should be there, what new need it's serving. All the shopper research that the manufacturer does may have a hard time distilling down. And so the reason why this is going to be cool or what it takes to move, and so often these new product launches fail. Even when the product was well-researched and well-documented, they get in the marketplace and they're just not able to get the message about why they exist out. I want to fix this. We want to fix this. We've got highly engaged retailers, high-service retailers, but we're missing that data. And so we want to use constructs like this new digital ad to collect information from you. So it turns out the baking category is down as an industry, but these new single serves are up, and you've got some new flavor, some new version of it that you're launching that based on market research needs to be in our stores, and we insert, if we understand what the strategy is, can merchandise it for you. We want to try to bring the fun stuff of our industry up, connect what you're trying to accomplish right down. And if this has a price or a promotion or a coupon with it, we'll want it. But often you don't need it. And even if it's just new news, we'd like to make sure you're engaging with us and thinking about IGA as the partner to help launching what you're doing. And whether that's something like this cake mix product or whether that's and training videos that we can launch in the store so that our associates can learn about it, or whether that's something of a new flavor, or that's a whole new category that we're in, or it's some product or promotion that we want to put together. I'd like you to leave this one to the premise that IGA is ready to listen. We want to listen to manufacturers. We understand what you're trying to promote, what your big bets for the year are. We provide a new, easier-to-use network for you to connect with that's super low cost. We want to be the cheapest partner you ever work with. And we want to share data so that we both know that we're moving. Because if we're listening to each other and we're listening to the shopper, nothing's going to stop us, and we're going to make great sales. And with that, I will end the formal part of this presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, and this is John. He's back. And anyone who's on wants to text in a question, go ahead. We've got John for a few more minutes. And I've got a couple questions for you that have come up. So, I mean, I'm thinking about this. I'm getting overwhelmed with omnichannel and its impact on retailers and manufacturers. So you said during the presentation, IGA competes with everybody. You're competing with Trader Joe's and dollar stores and drug stores and convenience stores. And then the manufacturer kind of challenge, he's trying to do omnichannel and trying to control his ROI of wherever that consumer, my targeted consumer is wherever they are in consuming media, I want to reach them with a message and possibly incentive and get them to, to get them down that road to decision making. How can manufacturers and retailers such as IGA work together?
So it's a great question, and I think it's how we earn our pay today. And whatever the person who had our job before, however hard their job was, it pales in comparison to what our jobs are now because there's so many more choices and it's so much more complicated. I'll go back to that cake example. So the baking industry in the United States, the baking industry has probably been off mid to high single digits year after year for a number of years. And of course, the manufacturers know the trends. Smaller households, people don't want to bake a full cake. It's calorie reduction, and so the temptation of having the whole thing in the house. But these single-serve products, going in with a product that's highly convenient, this is a microwavable product, that still gives you this snack experience without having to commit to this full cake. It fits with empty nesters, it fits with older shoppers, and it fits with younger shoppers that want to it hits all of the buzz points. But the way it may have been showing up in our stores before, it just shows up on a sales sheet, and the rationale for why it needs to exist. So working with a partner like Duncan Hines, once we understand the story, I want to build this as a media module, and I want to explain it to the shopper, engage video with it, however we're doing it. I'm going to push this out to the web together, and we'll go connect with IGA shoppers where they reside. And then I want to embed this information in my email, but I also want to build a training module for my stores. What you're seeing here in this picture, these are learning bites. These are little new video modules. I'm talking to you today from our new TVU studio that we built here in Chicago. We're building these little learning bites so that every associate in the chain can use their mobile phone. They can scan the product, and a little learning bite will tell them why this product's cool and new and why they should care and why their shoppers should care. And we're trying to do it in 2 minutes or less. So we're trying to bring the excitement about consumer packaged goods back to play And we're trying to use all of these touch points, these very inexpensive touch points, digital, the blogosphere, digital marketing, and then marketing to our associates in store as a way to work collaboratively on where we're going. And what I hope will happen is that little media unit, that little rectangle, that box that ends up on my digital ad also becomes a display ad that the manufacturer wants to put on their website. And then it becomes a display ad that my retailer wants to put on their website and embed in their email. And pretty soon the content begins to drive, because people start getting excited how cool this is. And, of course, the sales results are up. The SKU is probably up 17% on IGA year to date, right? The sales results start showing up. You start saying, wow, I don't, by working collaboratively and getting the rationale behind it and then building a plan together, we can really drive sales.
Okay, so innovation often comes from the independents. What have you seen in your travels, John?
I'm humbled on every trip. I was in Australia last week. I saw retailers that were doing amazing things, smoking meat on premise, and had built a glass case so you could actually watch the process and see what they're doing. I saw a retailer that's built a cheese sampling room, a refrigerated cheese sampling room that would rival any of the highest end cheese shops, but at grocery store prices. I was in Singapore recently, and I saw some of our retailers are using new LED digital signing to replace their print signing, and the price on that technology has come way down. But what makes it really cool about it is that you can use your mobile phone to scan the digital price sign, and it'll give you user reviews on the products in the store. So if you're trying to find something that's gluten-free, or trying to find something that meets your diet, or a recipe attached to this item, if you've always wanted to know what to do with spaghetti squash or whatever, they're using the digital signage to interact with the shopper in order to make them smarter in the aisle. In the U.S., I see so many of our retailers are expanding their assortments in categories in the store to become far more fun. An explosion of our retailers working on craft beers, for example, which is often an intensely local product, and double or tripling the display and using sampling, either allowing the shopper to buy individual bottles or merchandising craft beer the way a wine merchant might merchandise in order to draw attention to it. But even in line, I see some really exciting things. I was in a store recently where the guy was into hot sauces. It was his passion. He had the largest selection of hot sauces I'd ever seen. He had built a custom signage that displayed not only the heat index but the flavors. Again, he was merchandising hot sauces the way people might merchandise wine. And you looked at that display, and there's no way you would not pass through there and grab his recommendation or give it a try if you were at all interested in the category. And all these really fascinating ways that our stores are differentiating. I think the real key to what IGA's future is, we're a high service provider. We have the ability, the entrepreneurs there's no bureaucracy that stands in the way of getting excited about something new. If we can get the knowledge to them, they'll embrace it and roll forward, and really imagination and differentiation are the keys that allow our guys to succeed.
Okay. If a brand's doing a promotion and they want to work through IGA, how do they do that?
Well, it's super easy. We have this thing called Red Oval Partnerships, which in the past was more of a sponsorship. Today, we're trying to transform Red Oval Partnership to just be the conduit. Because obviously, if you wanted to go run an ad or get something promoted to 1,000 or 2,000 independents, that would be very difficult to do today. We've got over 40 ad groups just within IGA alone. So we're using the Red Oval Partnership as a mechanic. So if you've got a promotion that you're doing and you want to get your ad in or you want to communicate with us, it's a single telephone number to call. Heidi Huff, I believe, is on this call, and she manages that. You just let us know what you're trying to do, communicate the calendar and the cycle that you're on. If you want to do something, if it's a product launch and you want to do something creative with video or rich media, we can do it. If you want to do something where a recipe would play or an instruction sheet would play right within the ad, we can do it. And then if you wanted to brainstorm with us on something involving health or wellness, or even if it's just an inline product that you need to do a pump on sales to, we've got the capability to do a lot of really fun things at an exceedingly low cost, and sometimes even at no cost, because we want to learn right alongside you. And the thing that the brands would find out is you reach out to us and let us know what you're doing. We'll coordinate with the wholesalers to make sure that the wholesaler's on board. We're never going to do anything that doesn't support what our wholesale partners are doing. It's got to be in stock, right? It's got to be available to the retailer. But also we'll share the data back with you. So I know a lot of retailers hold sales data very close to the vest. We think that learning from our shoppers, and one of the best places to learn is how they respond through the register data is important. And so we've got a performance insights tool that we will share with you liberally, so are the things we're doing smarter and they're getting results.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up. If you didn't get all your questions answered, you can send them to me and we'll get them addressed. This webinar was recorded, and for participating, you will be sent a link. ACP members will also be able to view this in CIRO, the Coupon Industry Resource Library, in the member area of the ACP website. While I still have you, let me remind you a couple upcoming education and training events. More details are being finalized. We're planning a retail and manufacturer panel in late September. Topics will include e-commerce, click-to-card programs, universal digital coupons, shopper behavior, and your questions. We have representatives from Target, General Mills, and Procter & Gamble lined up so far, with more panelists to be announced. And also mark your calendars. The next Industry Coupon Conference will be April 30th to May 2nd, 2019 in Orlando, Florida. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you on the next call.
Thank you, John.